Good evening, and welcome to our conversation about the Center for the Arts. My name is Rick Davis, and I'm the Dean of the College of Visual and Performing Art at George Mason University, and I'm also the Executive Director of the Hilton Performing Arts Center. As you know, we operate two major performing arts venues in the Northern Virginia region, the Center for the Arts in Fairfax, which is our main topic tonight, and the Hilton Performing Arts Center on the Science and Technology campus in Manassas, Virginia, which we will be devoting tomorrow night's conversation to. Now, for accessibility purposes, I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm a white man with a gray beard, and I'm wearing a George Mason University ball cap, yellow, as I often do, green and gold, and a blue shirt. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And behind me is my home office with books, a desk, and occasionally my dog makes an appearance, always unplanned. If you should need it, we have automatic closed captioning available tonight on Facebook and YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook, please click the gear in the bottom right of your video screen for settings and toggle the captions button to on. For those viewing on YouTube, please click CC in the bottom right corner of your video pane, and automated closed captions will begin. And joining me in the Center for the Arts conversation tonight is our Director of Programming, Adrienne Godwin, and she'll be joining us in just a few minutes after I make an introductory remark or two. So the reason we've called you all together here tonight is to talk about the state of the arts as we understand them in this time of crisis. As of mid-March, venues began to close, and we put a hold on the rest of our spring season and then our summer season. And as we learned more and more about the progress of the pandemic, and we started to analyze the various safety precautions that were being suggested and in many cases required by various health authorities, we made the difficult decision a short while ago to suspend our fall programming as well. And as you have noted in the press, many other venues have been following along in sequence, doing that same thing, making that same painful and difficult decision. And then, of course, more recently, although with a longer historical route, we have experienced the crisis of social unrest and protest in the Black Lives Matter movement and the campaign for anti-racist practices, which has been such a strong presence in our consciousness for the last couple of months, although really, as I alluded to before, it's been there throughout American history, but it's risen to the surface in our consciousness very significantly in the last couple of months. And we are committed as an institution, and we've stated so publicly, to adopt anti-racist practices in our programming, in our curriculum, in our institutional life. And we are working very hard on meeting these twin crises head on and communicating with you as transparently as we can about our thought process and also about our action steps as we deal with both. So we will talk about both tonight, but I want to come back for a moment to the first crisis, the pandemic crisis, because it's had this immediate effect on our programming going forward and on our business operations as well. And I thought it might be important for you to know just a thing or two about the factors that we're considering as we make these difficult decisions. Number one, of course, is safety. That's your safety. That's the safety of the artists who work on our stages and exhibit in our galleries and rehearse in our studios. It's the safety of our students, and it's the safety of our production staff and house staff in our venues. So it's really the entire community that we are trying to look out for. And if you're following some of the scientific research that's going on, you've probably already know that many performing arts activities, especially singing, dancing, and acting, which are three of the things that we love to do and love to present, are some of the most dangerous things that one can do in the coronavirus pandemic era because of a phenomenon called aerosol transmission. And without getting too technical or demonstrating anything here, when you breathe deeply and speak or sing loudly, or when you exercise, your lungs produce a tremendous amount of air and small particles and larger particles that potentially carry virus. And so all of the guidelines about social or physical distancing have an extra factor weighed in when you're doing things that are active, like singing, dancing, and acting. So we've taken that into account. We've taken into account the persistence of these droplets in the air. We've taken into account what an audience looks like and how it experiences a work of art when you have to keep at least 6 feet and sometimes more between either people or family groups, parties, and how that flows in the lobby access, how people interact with the ushers and ticket takers, how they interact if it's a smaller venue, how they interact with the stage itself. All of these factors have been scientifically modeled, and we're keeping our eyes very much on that work. And that led us to the inescapable conclusion, not so long ago, that coming back to full production in the fall was not safe, not practical, and not artistically satisfying. Now, one more quick thing before I bring Adrienne in to talk about the programming impacts of this and some of the things that we're doing that I think are very exciting to not only keep our artistic relationships active and play the role in the artistic economy that we do play, which is as a presenter and producer of work, which helps keep the entire economy or ecology, if you will, of the artistic world alive. But we also have, of course, a university community to think of. And George Mason has adopted what we are calling the Safe Return to Campus plan, which is going to bring students and faculty back to campus, but in very limited or somewhat limited numbers in very carefully controlled situations. And some of the arts venues will be working with student groups, ensembles, small classes in a big space to do some of the things that we need to do as teachers and students of the arts in an in-person environment, but again, with very, very strict safety protocols. So we'll get into all that later as your interest would suggest, which reminds me to say one more thing before I bring Adrienne in. We are taking your questions and comments in the chat on Facebook Live and YouTube, and we will be forwarded those questions as they come, and happy to take as many of them as time permits. And we actually received some in advance as well. So we mean this to be a true conversation. So it is now my privilege to introduce my colleague, Adrienne Bryant Godwin, who is the Director of Programming at the Center for the Arts. And she's going to tell you a little bit about the programming plans, how they've been affected and how they're moving forward. Adrienne?
Thank you so much, Rick, and hello, everyone. I'm a white female with long red hair, and I'm wearing a green shirt with a black cardigan, and I am speaking to you from my home office, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I want to just start off just by saying that we really appreciate you all taking the time to join us tonight. We miss seeing you. We miss interacting with you. And though this isn't exactly the same as sitting in the theater together, at least we can have a back and forth conversation. So thank you. My colleagues and I have spent the past few months in seemingly endless industry conference calls and webinars as we, as a sector, figure out the best way to make it through this pandemic, ensuring that our artistic ecosystem is still healthy when we make it through this, which we will. And I'll admit that we're facing a very precarious time right now in the arts. Not only have venues lost all of their ticket revenue, but of course, the artists, the reason why we all are here gathered together, many of them have lost all of their revenue for the remainder of the year and for the months to come. And that includes, of course, all of those who support artistic work. producers, crew members, design teams, marketing teams. So it really is this ecosystem, and we're all working together to try to see what we can do, because we are all truly in this together. So I spent a lot of time speaking to agents and artists who were supposed to be featured on our seasons to try to come up with a plan that allows us to continue to support them and also provide opportunities to you, our patrons, our community, in the face of all these various uncertainties that we all face. So this spring, our response was the creation of Mason Arts at Home, which is a digital initiative that served as a platform for professional and student artists to be able to continue sharing their work with you. I think it's important to note that all of the professional artists who participated were compensated for their time, and we were thrilled to be able to offer 6 weeks of very full programming, which is all free to our audiences. So as we look to the fall, we're aiming to create a series of arts experiences that will be accessible to a wide variety of patrons with varying levels of comfort in terms of taking those next steps and returning to the concert experience. We're paying attention to data that we have collected from a variety of different surveys that we've administered to our audiences, which has helped to give us a better understanding of how you are envisioning that you will participate in the arts moving forward. So thanks to everyone who has participated in those surveys. My colleagues and I, as I mentioned, we've spent the last few months completely reimagining what a performing arts series can look like without the use of our traditional performance venues. And it's been both challenging and energizing to have to recreate the wheel in this way. And it's been incredible to see the truly brave and innovative ways that artists have embraced the current climate and how the industry is adapting together. So unfortunately, today I am not here to share with you our exact programming plan for the fall because I don't know it 100% yet. But I will tell you that we are exploring a wide variety of different options, and we hope to be able to share with you some concrete plans in the near future. As you can imagine, with the public health situation changing on a daily basis, it makes planning a cohesive fall season a bit more challenging, particularly as we are having to pay attention to the needs and comfort level of each artist or ensemble. And these vary greatly depending on where they're located and specific requirements for their artistic work, including whether or not they have to travel and how many artists have to be on stage at the same time. But I will tell you that I anticipate that the fall will include a mix of outdoor performances, which will, of course, follow all university and state protocols for safety and physical distancing. These will likely occur in the earlier months of the fall, September to October, maybe even early November. We're also pursuing offsite opportunities, ways that we can bring the arts outside of the campus and directly into the community. And then, of course, we're looking at digital content and live stream performances, some of which will be free and some of which will be ticketed with a paywall. And Mason Arts at Home will continue to be the go-to place for all of our digital content. And we'll be using some of what we learned this fall to kind of reshape the program so it might look a little bit different in the fall. But it will still continue to offer a diverse mix of content, including discussions, behind-the-scenes footage, streamed performances. And please know that as we are making these plans, we are not forgetting our loyal patrons and subscribers and are working to ensure that you all have special opportunities associated with each of our performances, which reflect our appreciation to you for your support. So I have had to come to grips with the fact that you may never see the season that we put together for the Center for the Arts 30th anniversary season, which, by the way, was the first full season that I had curated after arriving a bit over or almost 2 years ago. But I want you to know that we're doing the best that we can to continue to serve our mission of making the arts an intrinsic part of the lives of every Northern Virginia resident. And before I bring Rick back into the conversation, I just wanted to reflect a little bit on the topic that he brought up of racial justice, which is, of course, in the hearts and minds of all of us right now. And, you know, I know that many people talk about the arts serving as a reflection of society. And in that sense, I truly believe that artists serve as our historians and our truth tellers, our provocateurs, sometimes our moral compass. And as a performing arts center, we acknowledge the power that we have to shape the cultural landscape of our community. And particularly as we are connected to a major research university, it's our responsibility to elevate the voices of Black artists, Indigenous artists, artists of color, and support them by providing a platform to spark conversation within our communities as only artists can. So from a programmatic perspective, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this regard. And this applies to what artists appear on our stages, but also the need for rigorous analysis of ourselves as an institution, as Rick mentioned, to make sure that we're not passively promoting diversity, but that we are actively anti-racist. So this will take time. As one of my colleagues has coined the phrase that we want to be responsive and not reactive. But we know that we owe it to our community, our neighbors, our artists, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to foster an environment where artists and audiences of color feel supported, welcomed, and heard. And you may not be able to immediately see the results, but please know that we are doing the work and we take it very seriously. So with that, Rick, do you want to come join me and perhaps we'll answer some questions?
That would be great. Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for that excellent panorama of some of the programming that's coming, and you're carefully not revealing too much, which is always a good a good strategy. One of the questions that we got in advance, and it's a good one because it's very well, fundamental, and that is, when are you going to reopen? What precautions will you be considering for reopening? So I'll take part two of that and throw part one over to you.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, we're looking to host potentially some outdoor performances. So that would happen before necessarily our presentation series starts inside of the theater, which we're not yet sure when that will happen. We're going to have to follow the university protocols and, of course, the state protocols about when we can gather audiences safely. And I think for the professional series, and I'll let you speak actually to the student performances, but for the professional series, which is Great Performances, and the family series, it's a complex web of navigating these discussions with artists who many of them are on tours that are very they're each stop on the tour is necessary to make the finances work for the actual tour. So as soon as one presenter, falls out of that tour, sometimes it's impossible to make it happen. So everyone's realities are shifting on a daily basis. So we're just having to work with them to really be able to see when it will be possible to actually have them in. But for our professional series, I don't anticipate that happening before spring of 21.
In the traditional
format, yeah. Correct.
So on the student side, and on the, I should say on the academic side, including faculty artists and students, I think Mason Arts at Home will continue to be a great showcase for some very carefully curated highlight type events. And one of them I just will hope everybody tunes into on September 13th at 3:00. We're going to be doing a live stream concert from the concert hall stage, which will be performed in a appropriately socially distanced or physically distanced or musically distanced environment. But it is going to be the live stream version of our annual grand piano celebration, which is traditionally the kickoff concert for the concert hall. And it's the students and faculty from the School of Music focusing on the wonderful fact that for many years now we've been an all Steinway school in the School of Music, which means that our students and faculty have access to the finest pianos, not only on stage, but in all of the practice rooms, which has made a tremendous qualitative difference in the way we teach music and in what you hear from our stage. Well, every year we open the season with this grand piano celebration. This year, it will be more special than ever because we are using it also to celebrate and commemorate the naming of the School of Music. This is the first named school in the College of Visual and Performing Arts at George Mason. And the name is one that many of our loyal patrons and friends will know. It's that name Dewberry. The Dewberry family has been such a tremendous supporter of George Mason in so many ways. So we are now becoming the Riva and Sid Dewberry Family School of Music, and that will be officially announced and commemorated and celebrated with a brief program in and around the wonderful concert that is the Grand Piano Celebration. So that's an example of programming that will actually be originating in our venue, but it'll be originating without an audience and with a nicely produced, essentially TV show, live stream show. And we're really looking forward to seeing what our other academic programs, we know that the School of Music and the School of Theater and the School of Dance are all thinking about things that they might be able to contribute to the performance side. And then our programs in film and visual arts and computer game design are all making content that is actually some of it's digitally native in the sense that it's created digitally. Some of it is photographable or filmable in ways that translate well to the screen. And so we're really hoping that we present a wide range of student and faculty artwork as well from the fall semester going forward.
Rick, I'm going to build off of what you mentioned in terms of being able to live stream from our venue, because this is something that I'm really excited about, and that as a venue, we are really embracing kind of this next wave of what I think the performing arts, how we will function, which is that we are hopefully investing in some really great live streaming equipment, and this will allow us to adapt in many ways. But, as we continue to navigate this pandemic, and once we are able to potentially have some audiences in the venue, this gives us the opportunity for audience members who potentially still don't feel comfortable coming back in the venue. We can set up a live stream, assuming that the artist is okay with it, and be able to share with them exactly what's happening in the theater. So that flexibility, I think, is maybe a silver lining that's coming out of all of this. And our production crew has been working really hard to figure out all of those technologies. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. So I mean, we're learning so much. I mean, starting in mid-March, when we had to not only close the venues and come up with this wonderful Mason Arts at Home programming, but also we had to translate hundreds and hundreds of courses over the course of George Mason. It was 5,000 plus courses that had to go online instantly. Some of them made the transition pretty easily, some with more difficulty, some not so well. But our feeling is that we learned an awful lot in that process, and we learned things that we're going to keep doing, like live stream performance, like the integration of digital content. And we've reached new audiences. We've reached across the country and across the world, and we've reached into places where performing arts attendance is not necessarily as high as we would like it or love it to be. And so we're hoping to translate all of that into progress on all fronts going forward. I realize I didn't answer the second part of the question that I promised to answer, so I will. In terms of those precautions, so that people who want to come back can feel safe and in fact be safe. So right now, the best practice in the performing arts world, I mean, nobody's open. So in practice, I'm talking about the best science and the best planning, has a few key components. Number one is distance. We want to make sure that people are not on top of each other in lines, in whether it's for the restroom or whether it's for the entering the theater or at the ticket office. So we set up control flows for that. We want to make sure people are wearing masks. That's a state mandate right now, and we expect that's a best practice that will continue. And that we also want to make sure that we have very, very aggressive cleaning protocols so that surfaces that are high touch surfaces are cleaned frequently, and that the whole building, backstage and audience and front of house, is attended to very carefully. And then here's a more subtle thing, but it's actually really important when you think about it. Monitoring the HVAC, the heating, ventilating and air conditioning systems in the venues, so that there's a greater exchange of air. Because one of the things that has been very clearly demonstrated in the science is that the introduction of clean, fresh air and the exhaust of air that's been breathed into a lot is one of the best ways of diminishing or preventing the spread of the virus. So our physical plant staff and our university Department of Environmental Health and Safety are right up to the minute on the best science and the best engineering solutions for this. And all of those will be implemented in the venues, so that when we open, it's because we're confident that we'll be safe and you'll be safe. And I see that another question has popped up, and it's another good one. The impact of all of this on our staff. It's been profound. And I'll say one quick thing, and then Adrienne, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. I want to say, as dean of this college, my gratitude to the faculty and staff of CVPA is limitless. The group of artists and craftspeople and technicians and teachers who have taken this challenge so seriously and with such passion, it really is amazing. And the silver lining that Adrienne alluded to earlier, one of the silver linings is the deep learning that we have done about so many things that we might never have confronted before. This kind of gets those two themes blended again. But there is opportunity in crisis, and it needs to be understood and acted upon. And the faculty and staff of CVPA have really taken it and charged ahead. And Adrienne probably has 1,000 examples of what I'm talking about.
Well, I mentioned earlier reinventing the wheel for this fall. And this spring, we've kind of already reinvented the wheel one time with Mason Arts at Home. And it was very inspiring. As you mentioned, the staff was so generous and fearless and creative. And, one of the things when you take theater, when you take live performance away from people that work in the performing arts, you can, you start to feel it, that we are in this job for a reason. And it's because we love being together and, supporting artists. And the staff embraced the digital platform so wholeheartedly, and treated it as if we were doing a live performance. And it was admirable. And everyone was dealing with their own situations, of course, and had a different experience during the pandemic, but they showed up to work with smiles on their faces. And I have to say, as ideas are really starting to come to fruition for the fall, and things are starting to come together, it's great to see a light in the eyes and that excitement about really being able to get back to what we love, which is producing performances and sharing it with our audiences. So thank you for asking that question. That's very kind of our audience.
And on any show like this, there are many people behind the scenes, literally behind the scenes. If they so chose, they could press a button and their picture would pop up, but they're not going to do that because they have great professional discipline as well. But it takes a big team to make something happen, even as something as simple as this. So all of that performing energy is finding its way, finding a way to make it make itself felt. We've also taken great pains and pride in so far not having to execute any layoffs, which is something that we're as a university we are committed to. And I say that with great pride, also with great realism. Nobody can predict the future, but unlike some performing arts organizations that are more independent or freestanding, or are more seasonal in their work, that have had to make some very, very difficult decisions, which we acknowledge. So far, we've been very, very pleased to retain our full-time staff, and that is a commitment going forward insofar as we can predict. And Adrienne was saying earlier about the arts ecology that we're part of. The fact that we were able to not only pay the professional artists that we engaged for Mason Arts at Home, but also, and Adrienne, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about this, how we were able to, whenever possible, not just cancel a performance, but reschedule it or change it in some way that allowed us to gain the benefit of the artist's work and also make sure that they got at least a portion, if not their entire fee.
Sure. So when we knew that the writing was on the wall for the spring season, I remember speaking with you and saying, I would like to do everything that we possibly can to continue supporting these artists, knowing that it's not just our performance that's getting canceled, but it's likely all of the performances that we're going to allow them to survive. So yes, we worked with each artist, and I would say in almost all cases we were able to either reschedule or think of new creative ways for them to create content for Mason Arts at Home, to host a discussion. It's been great because I think a lot of artists are so busy touring that they don't actually have the time to. Some artists don't have the time to really dig into this to these engagement activities that we feel so strongly about presenting. So I've seen a lot of artists that are really leaning in and putting together entire educational programs, knowing that the fall, that many venues are having to cancel their performances in the fall. So it's really great, and people are learning that they love it, and I think that will affect the touring, how we tour moving forward.
So there's another interesting question has popped up about why we took the step of announcing cancellations. I don't know that we were the first of major venues in the region, but we were early in the decision process. And I'd love to claim clairvoyance or superior judgment, but I don't think that would be wise or correct. I do think that we had a couple of decision-making advantages. One is that we are part of a big state research university that has, for example, a College of Health and Human Services, the dean of whom is a former NIH staffer who knows epidemiology backwards and forwards. We have a Department of Environmental Health and Safety that has some incredible professionals working for it and also consulting with the best science. We were getting daily information that was at a very, very high level. And I think it helped us see a little bit into the future to realize that even if artistic performances could be presented, they would have to be presented in a way that was so unfamiliar in terms of audience distancing, possibly even stage distancing. You're starting to see pictures of ensembles rehearsing with stands, music stands 10, 15, 20 feet apart. It's interesting, but it's not what anybody would have signed up for on short notice for a spring or a fall season. So we took it all together and made a considered judgment to say that's, well, and of course, financially, the income is radically reduced when you have a physically distanced or socially distanced audience. So taking all those factors together and wanting to give both ourselves and our artist partners, our collaborators, enough time to really plan for the future, we took that decision when we did, and I'm very comfortable that we did that. Very happy that we did that. Any gloss on that?
I guess I'll just add that, the timeline for performing arts centers, particularly those at universities, we're usually planning seasons at least 1, if not 2 years out. So there's many smaller venues that, will book an artist once they learn that a tour is coming through the next month. That is not our model. We have a very, very long lead time, and that is to allow for adequate fundraising to make the performances happen, to allow for planning the time that they're on campus, booking a tour that makes sense financially for the artists. So when we went through the first round of cancellations in the spring, it was incredibly time consuming, and also pretty gut wrenching for everyone. And when we did make the decision to cancel our in-person performances in the fall, at least in the venue, we were again starting to see the writing on the wall. We were starting to have tours come to us cancel because they knew that they weren't going to be able to make it happen. And so we wanted to, instead of just continuing to reschedule for an indeterminate amount of time, we wanted to take a step back and say, we don't think this is probably going to be able to happen if we're realistic. And so let's take the opportunity to be thoughtful and be able to plan something that's really special, and also allow our artists to plan as well. Because if we had waited till, the month prior to their performance to plan, and then we canceled, it's much harder for them to regroup than if you give them a little bit of a lead time.
Yeah, that's such an important point, and we do try to be responsible members of that artistic community because we have a significant role to play. You mentioned fundraising a minute ago, and it turns out that we have a question about that. So I'd like to jump into that, and it's actually another very generous and farsighted question, which is I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. You're out of business. How important are donations and contributions and memberships and things like that when you're not actually doing anything? Well, so I made the question a little more blunt than it really was. But let me just say that first of all, what looks like out of business is the opposite. We're working harder than ever to not only to plan for the time when we're going to be back in live performance across our venues, but also to create these new ways of interacting with artists, which are an enormous amount of thought work and planning work. So we're actually working harder than ever, I would say, and we're spending money still to try to make these things happen, whether it's investing in new equipment or whether it's paying artist fees or honoring commissions and residency programs that we've established. The activity has gone a little bit below the radar, but it's amazingly active. Not only that, but as you can imagine, because you're part of our community, the revenue loss to any arts venue of any size during this period has been enormous. And it's with a great deal of recognition of our privileged status as members of a university community to recognize that we have at least somebody who's going to keep the lights on for us, which is not the case in the independent nonprofit sector in many cases. There are artistic institutions, individual artists, ensembles that are deeply imperiled by this moment in time. And it's important that we remember that those of us who can keep the lights on need to do everything we can to make sure that the whole sector is supported. But we're part of that sector as well. And we have an enormous need for the generosity of our patron community. The difference between just pretty good programming and excellent programming is your support. It's not ticket sales. Ticket sales are very important, but a full house doesn't usually pay the costs of putting on a show. In fact, it rarely does. It really is that's the base. But to add the extra layer of excellence, whether it's in the quality of the artist, him or herself, or the ensemble, or the ways in which that artist can interact with the community. I'm just thinking right now of the magnificent Bill T. Jones, Arnie Zane Company residency that we had this last fall. One of the world's major dance companies, they didn't just come and do a concert. They spent a week with us and created work with the citizens and the students of our community. And Adrienne, I mean, that's a philanthropic supported activity. And if you just remind us for 30 seconds of how special that was, because it's a perfect example of why philanthropy is so crucial to the work we do.
Sure. So Bill T. Jones was part of our inaugural Mason Artist in Residence cohort. And we not only had the company here for a performance, but had them here for a week, and were able to support the creation of a new work called What Problem, which had its world premiere here. And so we were able to allow the artist time and space in our theater with our full production crew in those final critical moments of that production, which is just invaluable to an artist. And what was particularly exciting about that project was the inclusion of, I think, approximately 25 community members, which were able to work with the company that entire week and helping to develop the piece, and then were part of the performance themselves. And it was a really, really special way to engage with our community. And I'm proud to say that those community members still talk amongst themselves, and we remain in contact with them, and we know that we truly have made them part of our family. There is no way that we could have done that on ticket sales alone. You're absolutely accurate in that. And it's interesting, as we're thinking, just a little insight into how we're planning for the fall. One thing that's particularly hard is planning for these reduced capacity scenarios where potentially we might only be able to have 250 people that are in attendance. Well, that makes it really difficult. We want to acknowledge the fact that our community, many of them have had financial circumstances arise because of the pandemic. And so without charging an arm and a leg, keeping that ticket price low, it becomes difficult to make the budgets work, to be able to actually bring incredible artists to our community without those contributions. So it is absolutely crucial.
So another question has come in off the ether, and I'm gonna read it, but I'm gonna have you answer it because it's related to our previous point here. Do you anticipate any artists upcoming in fall or spring that would be interested in doing virtual masterclasses and other work digitally? So sort of that engagement idea, but translated into digital terms.
Thank you for that question. And yes, absolutely. I was speaking a little bit about artists really embracing this time to kind of hone in on their education skills. And so yes, many people are interested in doing virtual masterclasses. And I'm excited to say that we will have actually a virtual residency in the fall with an ensemble, Third Coast Percussion, who's based out of Chicago. They're incredible, 2-time Grammy Award-winning ensemble, and they'll be working both with students in our School of Music and also with members of our off-campus community as well, doing a lot of really interesting digital work, including virtual master classes. So yes, it's very, very exciting to see what people are coming up with. So I hope that you will hope we'll be able to share that with you.
And that's the other exciting thing about this time, as difficult as it has been and is, we are finding new ways of reaching out. And I have found myself engaged in more activities, sitting at this chair, it doesn't replace the live engagement by any means, but it does enhance it, and it makes me want to do more of both. And I'm hoping that's kind of the feeling out there in the world. Oh, here's an interesting question, and this could be asked about either of our core venues, the Hilton Center or the Center for the Arts. So I'll answer for both. Are you doing any building renovations and enhancements during the downtime? Well, quickly at the Hilton Center, loyal patrons there may know that the air conditioning heating system there has been tricky ever since we opened, and we are. We're finally fixing it during this period, which is tremendous opportunity. At the Center for the Arts, a little bit less visible or audible enhancement, and in fact, it's nothing that you would know about unless I told you about it. But there's a persistent leak in the back wall of the hallway behind the concert hall where it joins our performing arts classroom building, and it's been bothering us for a long time, and now it's fixed, or it's about to be. And it's actually kind of wonderful that we were able to do that during this period, because it's a noisy process with a lot of pounding and welding, and it's pretty great. So thank you for that. I don't know if that was a patron question. So I would like to just offer one or two sort of, I don't know, closing thoughts maybe, and then turn it over to Adrienne for her benediction, and then I'll say goodnight. How's that for a plan? Okay.
Okay.
So I have a request for you in the audience. This is all about engagement, and we've talked about several different big things tonight. We've talked about the influence of a global pandemic on the performing arts and how we're coping with it. We've talked about a sudden but long overdue shift in our national consciousness about race and diversity and equity and inclusion. We've talked about new ways of reaching audiences with what we continue to believe is the transformative power of the arts. We haven't actually used this phrase tonight, believe it or not, but I'm going to use it now. We've talked about our motto, the arts create community. This community is being challenged as never before on many fronts, but it's also being redefined and expanded in ways that I find personally inspiring. So my request for you is to use this medium in whatever form is available to you and comfortable for you, to reach out to us and help us and tell us how we're doing and tell us what we've overlooked and tell us how to do our work in a way that is more meaningful to you, because that's ultimately what it's all about. And I believe that out of that dialogue, which is facilitated in ways that we've never had before, or we've had and chosen not to use or not known about, this is a moment to seize. Carpe diem, right? So thank you for tuning in tonight, and please feel free to take us up on that request. Adrienne?
Sure. I'll finish by actually answering one of the questions in the chat, which was asking about what we're looking forward to. And I have to say that one of the things that's been really inspiring is I feel like people that might not normally have come together to work together and to collaborate, it's been happening all over the place. I mean, I mentioned at the top of this conversation that I feel like I'm in a different webinar or a town hall conversation every single day, and people are talking, people that weren't talking before. And I think given what's going on in our country, that we are going to be able to use these new modalities for communicating and for engaging, to make some real change and to have meaningful interactions more broadly than we were ever able to have before. And so I'm excited to see how that can make the world a better place. To get a little cheesy at the end, but it's true.
Absolutely. We do not resist cheese. I'm true confessions. I'm from Wisconsin, so cheese is
The more cheese, the better.
is what there is. Well, on that exalted note, once again, thank you for joining us. We look forward to keeping this dialogue going, and we will see you online and in the theater as soon as we can. Good night.